Hey, Sonny here, and today I'm going to be taking a look at the song Koufuku Kei, its related event, and all of the symbolism and themes behind it. And there is a lot to talk about, so let's get right into it. Koufuku Kei, or Love and Punishment in English, is a song by LonePi, which was commissioned for Kanade's 6th Focus event, Knocking on a Dream That Never Wakes. Before this, none of LonePi's songs were already in the game. Even as of recording, Koufuku Kei is still her only song that's in the game, which is quite unusual. If you need ideas, Color Palette, Hydrangea and Gentiana are right there. LonePi first got into Vocaloid in primary school, and then later started posting her own original music in 2018. She usually uses Miku, Flower, or Kaiyuki, and makes her own music videos as well. Once you listen to enough of LonePi's songs, a certain sound quickly becomes familiar. LonePi has explained that this is a bass sound available in the music software PreSonus Studio One. She first started using it because she thought it was an interesting noise, and before long it became a staple in her music. LonePi's songs are often dreamlike and fast-paced, but with an undertone that's dark and empty sounding, and this dissonance is exactly what made her such a perfect choice for this event. But before I can explain why, first we need to look at the event story, Knocking on a Dream That Never Wakes.
真冬に曲を作らなくてもよくなったらどうするの?
The story starts with Kanade in her room. She is still trying to make a song for Mafuyu, but she's hit a dead end. Luca asks why, and Kanade explains that she's still trying to make a song that captures the warmth of Mafuyu's mother. And despite getting to see how much they love each other firsthand, Mafuyu and her mother weren't able to live under the same roof without causing each other to suffer. And so Kanade feels as though this song won't be able to save Mafuyu. Luca asks what Kanade's going to do then, and Kanade says she doesn't know. And she can't help but wonder why things didn't work out between Mafuyu and her mother. Kanade then gets a call from her grandma, and they go and visit Kanade's mother's grave. Kanade's grandmother comments that Kanade has a smile on her face, and that she's glad Kanade is able to make such an expression when visiting her mother now, since in the past Kanade would be quiet and look as though she blamed herself whenever she visited her mother's grave. Kanade apologizes for worrying her grandma, and says that the change in her demeanor is thanks to her friends. Kanade then talks directly to her mother, and whoo boy, this scene. Kanade talks about how she'd previously blocked out the happy memories of her mother, since remembering them was too painful for her. But now, bit by bit, she's been allowing herself to remember things. Like when her mother made a cake for her dad's surprise party, when her mother would read picture books to her, or when her mother taught her how to make dinner. And then we're shown a flashback to her mother's last moments in the hospital, and we see that she wished for Kanade to be happy.
お母さんは最後まで私の幸せを願ってくれてたよね。いなくなった後も幸せな毎日を過ごせるようにって。お母さんの言葉は今でもずっと私の宝物だよ。
And the way Kanade's voice starts to quiver as she's so close to bursting into tears made me want to cry. Like, Kanade usually isn't very open with her own emotions, so we rarely get to see her so vulnerable like this. And while she is slowly moving forwards, she is still grieving her mother, and it's clear just how much she misses her. Kanade then speaks to her grandma about Mafuyu's current situation, saying that she can't understand why things didn't work out between Mafuyu and her mother. Her grandma then explains that they're probably scared because they care about each other so much. And what they're scared of losing is the place that they belong, their figurative home.
家族でも友達でも恋人でも誰だって居場所がなくなるのは怖いもの。
そうなんだ。居場所がなくなるのは怖いか。それはわかる気がする。お母さんがいなくなった時も、お父さんの時も怖かったし、ニーグもなくなると嫌だなって思うから。
かなでちゃんの大切な場所だものね。
うん。
Kanade finds this hard to comprehend though, as Mafuyu doesn't need to be apart from her mother. Unlike Kanade, who tragically can never see her own mother again, Mafuyu's mother is right there waiting for her to return. Kanade's grandma then says that this girl must be very important to Kanade, and Kanade agrees, saying that she wants to be Mafuyu's strength. However, her grandma then adds that she hopes Kanade will be able to focus on the life that she wants to live one day, without being tied down by anyone else.
いつか、かなでちゃんも自分自身の人生を歩むのよ。誰にも縛られない、かなでちゃんだけの人生を。
And Kanade once again looks confused by this statement. Girl, please just think about yourself for once. We then see Meiko and Luka talking in the sekai, and Luka is getting fed up with the lack of progression from Mafuyu and especially Kanade. Mizuki and Ena have been making some huge steps and have moved past their main conflicts. Meanwhile, ever since Mafuyu has returned to Kanade's place, the two of them have stagnated. Mizuki and Ena appear in the sekai, and then Kanade appears not long after. They ask her what's up, and Luka prompts Kanade to tell them what her grandmother said to her. Mizuki says that she understands what her grandmother meant, as Mizuki was also afraid of losing her place in Night Court, and that's why she kept her secret for so long and kept running away. Kanade then wonders if it would be possible for Night Court to become Mafuyu's home, and Meiko says that while Night Court is definitely important to her, Mafuyu values her family even more. Mizuki adds to this, saying that friends can't become family, which I disagree with, but maybe this belief will get challenged in the future. Luka then specifically asks Kanade what she thinks, and Kanade says that she doesn't know. She doesn't understand what Mafuyu and her mother are so afraid of losing. So then Luka directly asks Kanade what would happen if she actually succeeded in saving Mafuyu. If she didn't have to make songs for Mafuyu anymore, then what would Kanade do?
もしあなたが願い通り真冬を救うことができたとして、真冬に曲を作らなくてもよくなったら、どうするの?
And Kanade, of course, doesn't have an answer to this. And this is interesting, because in the past, Kanade probably would have responded to this by saying something like, I'd move on and find the next person to save. I need to keep composing. But instead, she just stares at Luka as if she's never even considered the question before. Luka opens her mouth to put it even more bluntly, but is stopped by Meiko and later scolded by her for going too far. Meiko is just so done with Luka and Kaito's shit. Back at home, Mafuyu notices that something's wrong, but Kanade brushes her off, saying that it's nothing. Them not communicating is killing me. Kanade goes to get some rest, but she can't get Luka's words out of her head, and she starts to spiral because of it.
私の曲でちゃんと真冬を救うことができて、家族みんなで分かり合えて幸せになって、真冬が心から笑顔で過ごせるようになって、私は真冬に曲を作らなくてもよくなる。作らなくてもいいんだ。なんだろう、これ。どうして。
And it's this scene right here that this whole event is built around. Kanade has tied her entire self-worth and purpose in life to creating a song that will save Mafuyu. She doesn't know what she'll do once she achieves that goal, because she hasn't considered anything beyond it. And that's exactly why her current mindset is so self-destructive. Kanade has found the place where she belongs within Night Court, and she's currently living with Mafuyu, so her house doesn't feel as empty as it did before. Instead of thinking about her own future and her own happiness, Kanade is instead distracting herself with this temporary happiness and the impossible goal of saving Mafuyu. Kanade doesn't want to think about what will happen once Mafuyu is quote-unquote saved, because then she'd have to wake up and face reality. Because the reality is that once Mafuyu moves out again, Kanade will be all alone. And not only that, but once Kanade makes this perfect song, she probably believes that Mafuyu won't need her anymore, and that's what she fears the most. It all ties back in with what Kanade's grandma was saying about being scared of losing the place that you feel you belong. Unlike Kanade, all of her friends are starting to look towards their futures. But if all of her friends were to one day move on from Night Court, then where would that leave Kanade? Kanade is snapped out of her thoughts by a message on Night Court, with Enna and Mizuki wanting to talk about Mafuyu's situation. And Kanade immediately goes back to distracting herself with Mafuyu by saying that she shouldn't just be thinking about herself. When, no, Kanade, it's the opposite. Enna and Mizuki explain that while they agree that Mafuyu and her mother coming to an understanding would be the best outcome, they think that for now what the two of them need is time. When Enna tried to chase down Mizuki after the incident on the rooftop, she wasn't able to say anything. But now, after the fact, Enna is glad that she took the time to think her thoughts through before confronting Mizuki again. And Mizuki agrees with this, saying that at the time she probably wouldn't have listened to anything anyone said to her, so it's better that Enna waited. And so, they conclude that for now, what Mafuyu and her mother need is distance from one another. That way they can think about everything more thoroughly and grow as people before facing each other once again. And this whole spiel could also double as being what Kanade needs to do as well. Kanade also needs time to think through her own thoughts and be apart from Mafuyu, and I think she subconsciously understands that, which is exactly why she's so hesitant to accept what Enna and Mizuki are suggesting. She also still can't comprehend what the problem between Mafuyu and her mother is, because they're family and they love each other, so shouldn't the solution be simple? And this is because Kanade is once again conflating Mafuyu's mother with her own mother. It being clear just how much all of this family talk is affecting Kanade.
一緒にいられる方法はないのかな。二人はお互いに一緒にいたくて愛し合ってるから。二人ともそうしたいって思ってるだろうし、家族なんだから。
Kanade thanks Enna and Mizuki for speaking with her, and just before she hangs up, Enna reminds Kanade to take care of herself. I love how much Enna cares about Kanade.
気負いすぎないでね。真冬を救うために頑張ってる奏のことは尊敬してるよ。でも自分のことも大事にしてね。それだけが奏の幸せじゃないんだから。
And then the story ends with Kanade deciding that she needs to consider what everyone has said to her.
ちゃんと考えなきゃ。真冬が救われるにはどうすれば一番いいのか。エナが言ったことも、水木が言ったことも、それにルカが言ったことも。ちゃんと考えて答えを出さなきゃ。
So what this event is finally addressing is Kanade's codependency on Mafuyu. A criticism/complaint that I see directed towards Kanade a lot is that her events focus too much on Mafuyu. And yeah, some of them do, because that's actually the point that the narrative is trying to make. Because Kanade isn't thinking about herself either. She isn't paying attention to anything other than her goal of saving Mafuyu. Codependency refers to a dysfunctional relationship where one person will sacrifice their own needs and well-being in order to help the other. And this causes both parties to become unable to function independently, making it harder to leave the relationship the longer it goes on. It's important to note that codependency can present itself in any kind of relationship, it's not just in romantic ones. It can also occur in friendships and family dynamics as well. There are 4 core codependent behaviors: external focusing, self-sacrifice, interpersonal control, and emotional suppression. And Kanade has been showing signs of all 4. She focuses all of her time and attention into creating songs for Mafuyu. She neglects her own needs to achieve this goal, frequently forgetting to eat and sleep. She believes herself to be the only person who can do this for Mafuyu, and for a period of time, she didn't want Mafuyu's mother to take Mafuyu away from her. And she always puts her own needs and emotions aside, and instead continues to focus on helping others, not herself. Mafuyu, on the other hand, is fresh out of an emotionally abusive relationship with her mother, and because she is still very passive and not confident in expressing her own feelings yet, Being with Kanade is comforting to her since she doesn't have any expectations placed on her and she doesn't have to mask her true emotions. But she is also relying on Kanade to one day save her, which only puts more pressure on Kanade. And while their current relationship may not look toxic on the surface, being together as they are now is hindering both of their abilities to move forwards. And as Luca put it, they've stagnated. At the end of And So the Clock Hands Start Ticking, Mafuyu wasn't the only one who went backwards. It was both of them. We saw in Unreliable Notes how easy it is for Kanade to fall back onto bad habits and focus on nothing but creating songs. She's responding to questions with "I don't know" a lot more than she used to, just like how Mafuyu did at the start of her story. So this could be a sign that Kanade is slowly losing her own sense of self. And now it's gotten to the point where everyone around her is starting to notice this too. Kanade's grandma has always encouraged her to think more about her own future, Kaito has pushed her to stop ignoring her own feelings, and Enna has been reminding Kanade to look after herself as well. Luca was extremely direct about it, but I think finally putting this seed of doubt into Kanade's head will ultimately be a good thing for her. Since the first and hardest step to unlearning codependent behaviours is realising that you're codependent to begin with. And most importantly, even Mafuyu has noticed how self-destructive Kanade's current behaviours are. Ever since Unreliable Notes, Mafuyu has been paying a lot more attention to Kanade, making sure she eats and gets proper rest. And this is good, but it's also not Mafuyu's job to be Kanade's guardian. Right now Mafuyu is very vulnerable and blames herself for causing her mother to suffer. So if she starts believing that she's the cause of Kanade's suffering as well, that can't be good for the poor girl. Mafuyu has been seeing firsthand just how much chasing this impossible goal is affecting Kanade, to the point where in their second World Link event, Mafuyu's first reaction to hearing that Kanade wants to make a song for her is to say no and tell her she doesn't have to do that, meaning that Mafuyu doesn't want to place that same burden on this alternate timeline Kanade. Way back at the start of Nightcord's story, Mafuyu referred to Kanade's desire to help her as just another curse that she's placing on herself. But Kanade believes it to be a necessary burden that she needs to bear in order to atone for what happened to her dad. She even calls it nothing but her own ego. Literally from the onset of their relationship, both of them were, in a way, wanting to use each other for their own gain. With Kanade desperately searching for someone to save, and Mafuyu desperately searching for someone to save her. By the way, full disclosure, I do ship Kana Mafu. They're actually my favourite pairing in the game. So I'm not trying to bash them here or anything. Don't take it the wrong way. Anyways, both Kanade and Mafuyu are starting to realise that maybe their relationship can't stay the way it is forever, and that something needs to change. They've grown to care about each other much more than when they first met, and they're an irreplaceable existence in each other's lives. They just maybe kinda need to communicate their feelings a little better. Before we move on to the cards, I just quickly want to mention the title of this event, Knocking on a Dream That Never Wakes. This is likely referring to how Luca's question knocked on the door to try and wake Kanade up to reality. However, there is an extra layer to this title, since the kanji under what we're told to read as yume, which means dream, is actually genso, which means fantasy or illusion. So it has the double meaning of this dream being nothing but a fantasy, Kanade's own delusion that she's refusing to wake up from. As of recording, this event isn't out on the global server, so we don't have an official English title yet, but I am very curious to see how they decide to localize this one. The event logo itself is also very soft and dreamy. The clouds and colour palette also tie in with the event trailer, which shows an impossibly long staircase ascending to the heavens, basically. It's like that one Pokemon opening, or like Rolling Girl. There is a heart-shaped lock in the kanji for thought. This is also the kanji in omo, which can mean emotions. So it's like Kanade has placed a lock on her own emotions. Lastly, there are two threads, one red and one blue, which means that I get to talk about the red thread of fate again, which I'm very excited about, but I will wait until we get to the 2DMV to yap about it some more. The dream motif carries over to the cards, which are stunning by the way. Like, this set is absolutely gorgeous. This gacha is called Happy Ballerina, with question marks on either side of it. And this is punctuation used in Spanish to indicate a question. So are these ballerinas really happy? At first glance, it looks like a soft and happy set, But when you look a little closer, there are signs that things may not be as peaceful as they seem. These cards have an amusement park setting, like Obscurity Parade. However, this park looks a lot more inviting with its pastel colour palette, compared to like the solar flare over here. The rides and everything have a more childlike appearance too, as if they're all toys in a toy box. Actually, not as if. In Enna, Meiko, and Mizuki's cards, we can see that these rides are in fact toys, or like miniature versions of the real things, with the horses in the carousel being made of wood, and the Ferris wheel being too small for a human to actually ride. And not only that, but we can see some signs of damage all over the place. Broken posts, tangled strings, and rubble on the floor. To Enna, Meiko, and Mizuki at least, it appears that this theme park is beginning to fall apart. However, if we look at Kanade again, we can see that she's the only one whose surroundings are in perfect condition. And not only that, but her theme park is scaled correctly. These aren't miniatures. There's proper rides and a grand Ferris wheel behind her. She is yet to realize that this happy place is fake. And not only that, but every single one of the rides in these cards are rides that go in circles. So we've got Ferris wheels, carousels, spinning teacups, and whatever these two rides are called. A subtle reference to the fact that Kanade is stuck going in circles without actually progressing forwards. Kanade herself is seen gazing into a mirror. This isn't the first time a mirror motif has been used for Kanade either, as we've seen it before in Samsa and even more notably in DNA. In DNA, the mirror metaphor is being used to show how other people may see you differently from how you see yourself, and vice versa. And here we have Kanade looking at herself, reflecting on who she is and what her own desires are. Except, if you zoom in really close, we can see that the person reflected in this mirror isn't Kanade at all. It's Mafuyu. So despite it seeming like Kanade is reflecting on herself, she's actually staring at Mafuyu and wondering how to help her. And this is the reason that Kanade's theme park hasn't crumbled yet, because she's completely oblivious to it. The park could actually be in complete ruins for all she knows. But because she hasn't bothered to look at anything other than Mafuyu, as far as Kanade's aware, the park is still perfectly fine. The only sign that she's maybe starting to wake up to things is this crack in the mirror. This could also be a sign that Mafuyu is the only one who has the ability to wake Kanade up from this dream world. And this is where Obscurity Parade comes back into it. If you put the cards side by side, the contrast is obvious. One depicts Kanade in a fluffy dream, whilst the other has Kanade in her lonely reality. Another thing that these card sets have in common is 3 of the cards being more realistic, while one is completely fantastical. They can also be connected through DNA's lyrics. The you who lies beyond the mirror, and the me who's reflected deep within your eyes. Unlike Mafuyu, who is fully aware of how painful her reality is, Kanade is still willfully oblivious to her own despair, and that's why her dream world is still intact, while Mafuyu's is completely devoid of colour and bleeding red. However, a key difference between these card sets is that in Unreliable Notes, Kanade was trying to make a song based on Mafuyu's mother, and she still didn't trust her at all at this point. Whereas in Dream That Never Wakes, Kanade is thinking a lot more about her own mother, and that would obviously play into the different vibes of the cards. Kanade is depicted as a ballerina, specifically the kind you'd see in a wind-up jewellery box, since you can see the mechanism to wind her up on the side of the stage here. However, Kanade has abandoned her post and is instead distracted by this mirror. Also, in the music video for The Light That Dwells Here, Kanade is depicted as a ball-jointed doll with a wind-up key right in the centre of her chest. So this is a recurring motif for her. The music box that Kanade's dad made is a symbol of the happy times they spent together as a family. And this motif is present whenever Kanade is reminiscing about those times. Most notably in her Carnation Recollection set, where Kanade is seen laying within a music box, sleeping soundly with a smile on her face as she cradles her parents close. And interestingly, in this set, Luca is seen waiting outside on the other side of the door. So perhaps this dream is the one that this Kanade is seeing, and at some point this door fell closed, locking everyone else out. So all Luca can do is knock on it in an attempt to wake Kanade. Moving on to Kanade's outfit, what stands out immediately is the heart-shaped lock in the centre of her chest. This could also be where her wind-up key is supposed to be placed, the key itself being on her wrist. This lock is also the only section of Kanade's dress that is her own character colour, the rest of the dress being purple, like a certain someone. Another notable detail is the fact that the choker around her neck has no way to be removed. Instead of the typical ballerina shoes, Kanade's heels are extremely high, which is reminiscent of Mafuyu's imprisoned marionette set. And looking at all of these cards made me realize that Kanade has never been depicted standing up in any of her focus cards before. Which makes me think that once we reach the culmination of her arc, we'll finally get to see her confidently standing on her own 2 feet. Lastly, Kanade's dress, hair, and the entire theme park are decorated by this particular flower, and I tried really hard to pinpoint what exactly these flowers are supposed to be, but I can't say for sure. So instead, I will present you with some very likely candidates, along with their meanings in flower language. Flowering dogwood, pink evening primrose, dog roses, and sweet briar. While I have no way to confirm whether this is actually the flower that they were going for, out of these options, I would personally like to believe that they are sweet briars, because the potential symbolism is just really cool. While sweet briars don't mean anything too crazy in flower language, this flower is notable for its association with Sleeping Beauty. In the Brothers Grimm version of the tale, the princess is called Little Briar Rose. And I think Aurora is also nicknamed this in the Disney version. And I don't think I need to explain why Sleeping Beauty could be relevant here. I also just think the possibility of the association is cool, since Mafuyu has been compared to Snow White before, so now we could have Sleeping Beauty Kanade as well. Now we just need Prince Mafuyu to wake her up. Another useless fact about sweet briars is that their leaves smell like apples. Anyway, moving on to Enna's card. Enna is sitting on the floor with a concerned expression on her face. She's looking down at this broken toy soldier, wondering how to fix it. It looks as though this toy soldier is supposed to sit beside this blue one, who is holding a keyboard. Judging by the colours of these guys, I'd say they're supposed to represent Kanade and Mafuyu. Enna is concerned for the soldier and probably sees her friend in it, worried that Kanade will end up broken in the same way if she doesn't start taking better care of herself. Enna's dress is really pretty, having an extra bit of artistic flair on the back. She has a lock on the back of her choker and a key on her wrist like Kanade. And she has a cute little butterfly motif on the back of her shoes, representing the fact that Enna has moved past her main conflict and is wholeheartedly working towards her dream of becoming an artist. Next we have Meiko, who is doing what Nikon Meiko does best and observing. Like Enna, she wears a concerned expression and is looking off to the side. Since Meiko doesn't directly interfere with the girls, all she can do is watch on and hope that Kanade can come to a conclusion on her own. Meiko has a wind-up ballerina behind her and a rabbit in a pot of flowers in the foreground. This rabbit is also a wind-up toy by the looks of it. And these could also be here to represent Kanade and Mafuyu. And the fact that these two pillars, I guess, are so far apart from each other could be implying that Meiko thinks that they need some distance as well. Meiko's outfit is slightly different from everyone else's. Interestingly, the main flower on Meiko's dress is actually roses. Next is Mizuki. Mizuki is seen actually doing what a ballerina does, and dancing. The way her arms are placed looks as though she's hugging this Kanade-coloured moon, hoping to support her. Beside this moon is another one facing the other direction, and these are once again supposed to represent Kanade and Mafuyu. And you'll see in a bit that both of these moons show up again in the 3D MV. There's also a third moon off to the side, but I don't know who that is. Bro thinks he's part of the team. The area Mizuki is in is the darkest of the four, but there is still a warm light shining down on her, which makes the card feel more hopeful. And this could tie in with how Mizuki has told Kanade to her face before that her music has already managed to save her. Mizuki wears a cute heart-shaped tiara, a key hangs from her neck, and her back is adorned with little butterfly wings, which is like Enna, showing that Mizuki has moved past her main conflict and is walking towards her own future goals. Lastly, we have Mafuyu. Along with Mizuki, Mafuyu is also dancing, except the way her arms are posed almost looks like she's being puppeteered. Mafuyu has a wind-up key hanging from the back of her choker and a lock right on the small of her back, with tiny flowers decorating the hem of her dress. Despite only being a 2-star, she is still very pretty. So those are my thoughts on the cards. but I feel like there's so many different ways you could interpret the setting and details here. So if you have anything that you'd like to add or see things differently to me, please feel free to write your own thoughts in the comments. I'm curious to see how other people interpret this set. Now, without further ado, we can finally look at the event song, Koufuku Kei. This was LonePi's comment when the song was first announced. I created this song using the theme of an uneasy feeling that won't seem to go away, like the murky feeling of an overcast sky. Despite the cute veneer, I aimed to have a slight sense of unease drifting throughout the song. So I focused on choosing words that rhyme for the lyrics, and created a catchy melody that'll get stuck in your head. It's a song that captures the feeling of your heart suddenly being impacted by lasting emotions, even if nothing particularly special occurred. It'd make me happy if people are able to relate to this song and see what I was going for. First, let's take a look at the title of the song. The official English title, as seen in the 2D MV of the song, is Love and Punishment. This title is perfectly fine, but it loses a bit of the nuance that the Japanese title has. Koufuku Kei literally translates to happiness punishment, and you could interpret this in so many different ways. Is it a punishment for being happy, or is happiness itself the punishment that's being applied here? I think that this title alone already achieves the cute yet uneasy vibe that LonePi was aiming for. Like, you have these soft wispy visuals on the song jacket, and then the word punishment just slaps you in the face. Also, this is just an extra nerdy fun fact, but if you look back to the origins of the character for happiness, it originally depicted handcuffs or shackles. This was because back in ancient times, if you were to commit a crime and get off with shackles being your only punishment, then you managed to escape a worse fate of being beaten or executed. So out of the options, shackles were seen as being fortunate. I've been thinking about this title a lot ever since the song dropped, and the way that I personally interpret it is that the punishment for being happy is the fact that you were happy at all. Like, once you've lost that initial happiness, everything afterwards feels like a punishment, if that makes sense. Another neat detail about the title is that if you just go by ear, Koufuku Kei could be interpreted as Koufuku Kei, the letter. And what this brings to mind is Nightcord's second World Link event. In this event, we, ironically enough, see a dream world that was subconsciously created by Kanade. This dream presents us with an alternate timeline where Kanade's father takes care of his health and doesn't end up in the hospital. Kanade is much happier in this timeline. A Koufuku Kei, if you will. Except the cruel twist is that while Kanade is happy, none of her friends are. And due to this change in Kanade, her music no longer connects with them either. And so she is unknowingly not able to save the very people that she wants to save most. So if you really want to stretch the meaning of the song title, the punishment for a timeline where Kanade is happy is that none of her closest friends are. When the trailer first dropped for Kana 6, my very first thought was that the song sounded similar to Torikoroge, and I don't think this is just a coincidence. So far, Kanade's focus songs can more or less be divided into 3 groups. Songs directed at Mafuyu and Mafuyu's mother, songs made purely for Kanade herself, and then Kanade's vent songs. Unlike Mafuyu's vent songs, which are loud and explosive, Kanade's are instead fuzzy and laid back, like a lullaby that'll put you into a sleep you won't ever wake from. Torikoroge is a song by Nilfruits that was made for Kanade's second focus event, Someday from the Depths of Despair. Torikoroju is about feeling like a prisoner to your own life, and resigning yourself to the hardships that you must endure in order to survive. In Kanade's case, this would be her resigning herself to composing songs for other people, as she believes this to be her duty and sole reason to continue living. Tirelessly making songs is her punishment for the sin that she believes she committed, the only way she can atone for taking away her dad's happiness. So the prisoner theming of Torikoroju can tie in with the punishment aspect of Koufuku Kei. The Nico Nico description for Torikoroju even reads, "Where is my true happiness?" Anyways, let's move on and jump right into the 3D MV. We open with a colourful transition and then see Kanade slowly walking by herself. Her eyes are downcast and she seems to just be walking aimlessly forwards, almost like a zombie. She's framed by 2 large crescent moons, one purple and one coral in colour. And these are obviously supposed to represent Mafuyu and Kanade respectively. And moons have been used to represent these 2 before, in the 2D MV for Lower One's Eyes. Except in that MV, Kanade and Mafuyu were half moons, which when put together would become a whole. But now both of them are crescents, and therefore no longer able to make a whole, reflecting how their relationship is no longer sustainable and fulfilling for both of them if it remains as it is. And since we're talking about Lower One's Eyes, Kanade was depicted as the Hanged Man tarot card in this set. And while she was probably in the upright position back then, I think it's actually the reversed meaning that suits her more now. The entire opening instrumental is just this shot of Kanade walking, which really hammers home the sense that she's been in this state for a very long time, endlessly walking towards a destination that may never be reached, working on song after song without caring to take a break or look at her surroundings. I also just love the juxtaposition between the cute and fluffy atmosphere and then Kanade's zombie-like movement. Like, right off the bat, it's already unsettling. We've moved locations to a dark room with another crescent moon in the back, along with miniature buildings and hot air balloons. Mizuki walks in from the side, and all of the camera work throughout this MV is really cool. The sneaky meta tactic that Mizuki is referring to is likely just waking up, since the easiest way to escape something in your dream is to just open your eyes. I love how bouncy the choreography is here, and Mafuyu's line reminds me of this lyric from DNA. This whole section of lyrics is pretty clearly describing Kanade's situation of distracting herself with composing, and how she just keeps trying to find a new idea after each foothold crumbles. To me, it also paints a picture of her struggling to sleep, so she goes back to composing instead. As Enna says her line, the door behind her starts to open, and the lighting turns green. We get a better look at the room as some of the teacups begin to spin around, and it's all very childish, like they're dancing inside a toy box or a dollhouse. As Meiko sings, the rest of Night Chords circle around her as if they're taking the place of the threads. The tangled threads could represent someone that needs saving, and that's why Kanade is searching for them. But since the sun has set, Kanade is searching in the dark and cuts her finger. First of all, this is probably wordplay on yubikiri, which means pinky promise. The literal translation of yubikiri is to cut off one's finger. If you know the song Yubikiri by Skopu, then you probably already know what I'm talking about here. Yubikiri is said to originate in Yoshiwara during the Edo period, since some courtesans would chop off part of their pinky finger as a vow to their lover. So Kanade saying that she cut her fingers could also have the double meaning of making a promise, which would refer to the promise she made with Mafuyu to make a song to save her. So like, fumbling in the dark, all she can do is cling to that promise. However, in the 3D MV, Kanade doesn't hold out her pinky finger. She holds out her index finger and recoils as if it's been cut. And this is where my crack theory becomes relevant again. Because tell me, dear viewer, how does Sleeping Beauty fall into her deep slumber? That's right, she pricks her finger on a spindle. And Kanade was searching for a thread and then recoils as if she's pricked herself. Like, is the Sleeping Beauty thing actually intentional, or am I just going crazy? There is also a third possible implication, which will be discussed later. The lights turn back on, illuminating the room in a warm yellow. A purple moon can be seen through the window now too. Enna comes and stands next to Kanade, as if she's stepped forward to support Kanade. The same thing happened with Mizuki earlier in the song too. Something interesting about the line distribution with this song is that Kanade and Mafuyu only sing together once, and it's this lyric about being broken apart, so take from that what you will. I love this little frame movement they do, and we get a cute close-up of Mizuki. However, her smile looks quite sad. And this lyric could be referring to how Kanade is always looking at the bigger picture instead of properly taking a look at Mafuyu and how she feels. It could also be referring to how Kanade isn't able to understand why Mafuyu and her mother can't get along. because she keeps relating them back to her own family. When family dynamics can vary greatly between different people, and what works for some people doesn't work for others. We transition back to Kanade walking, and we can see that night has fallen. But that doesn't deter her as she just keeps stumbling forwards. Then we cut to a different scene and see Nightcord standing in a black void with teacups spilling over behind them. And I'm not exactly sure what this visual is supposed to symbolize. If you have any ideas, let me know. This one's lost on me. Teacup visual aside, the lyric here is actually my favorite one in the song because it's just so unnerving. To me, it reads as Kanade disregarding her body. Like, she's used to her physical body hurting since she's always overworking herself, but now because of the current dilemma she's facing, her very core has started to hurt as well. To give a little more context, the word used here is kokoro. If you're a fan of Japanese media, you've definitely heard this word before, and it's commonly translated as heart. However, the word for heart, the organ, is shinzo, which is what's used earlier in the lyric. Kokoro is a difficult word to translate as there is no real English equivalent. It's your mind, thoughts, feelings, heart, and spirit all at once. Your kokoro is the very core of who you are and what makes you, you. So while the heart and brain are physical organs in your body, the kokoro is more of an abstract concept. So this lyric is separating mind and body in a way. It shows that Kanade is suffering a lot more than she lets on, and that the pain is getting harder and harder to ignore. And I like that you can see the rest of Nightcord reacting to Kanade as she says this. Meiko lifts her hand and looks as though she wants to intervene, but retracts her hand at the last second, since she's supposed to just observe. Mizuki looks down at her hands and shakes her head, and Mafuyu just kind of stares off into space. They want to help, but aren't sure how. And then Enna is the only one who fully reaches her hand out, wanting to do whatever she can to support Kanade. We cut back to the main room, and it's even more lit up and brighter than before, much to the contrast of the hopeless lyrics. There's colourful stars dancing about as the hot air balloons move up and down like it's a little party. I don't know anything about music theory or anything like that, but I read a couple comments pointing out that this song actually shifts down a key in the final chorus, which could tie in with the fact that staying in a codependent state will only make it harder to escape the longer it goes on. It also just adds to the uneasy atmosphere, like Kanade is sinking further and further into this delusion. Kanade remarks that cracks are starting to show in her everyday with Mafuyu, and the word for coexistence or symbiosis is literally used. However, if this coexistence continues, the sky will stay clouded over, and Kanade looks miserable as she says this, holding her hand out as if she doesn't want to watch Mafuyu go. And it's not just Kanade who looks miserable either. Despite the pretty visuals, none of the girls smile once from here on out. This is probably my second favourite lyric, because it ties in with how Kanade saw nothing but darkness when she tried to think about her future beyond her goal. And also, despite the line being, "My thoughts always cease right there," the song doesn't stop or pause in any way to let that sink in. Just like how Kanade doesn't let herself dwell on her own feelings, and instead continues to distract herself with making songs. It's such a telling lyric, and yet the song barely gives you any time to process it. And I think that's entirely by design. Not only that, but right after this, we transition to an even fluffier background. With everything now being drawn like it's right out of a picture book, it's even more fictional than before. The cute visuals desperately trying to make you ignore the lyrics and the underlying despair in the song. Kanade, who once sung about change in Samsa, is now saying that she can't change, and never will. She's not going to bloom into a butterfly and fly away, as her feet are still stuck on the ground. As Kanade turns her attention to Mafuyu, we get a single shot of her staring blankly at the camera. Kanade clenches her fists and raises her hands to the sky like a prayer. And despite all of the previous lyrics diving into Kanade's bleak mindset, the song still ends on her thinking about Mafuyu. However, at the very end of the MV, we see Kanade finally stop to look at her surroundings, a shooting star falling between the two moons. So, while Kanade hasn't fully woken up yet, she has taken the first step to doing so, and is reconsidering the state of her current relationship with Mafuyu. Before we move on, I want to point out a couple things that can only be seen in the Afterlife version of the 3D MV. Firstly, we actually get to see the choreography for the instrumental part at the start. When Meiko mentioned the tangled thread, some thread actually appears around her, and when Kanade cuts her finger, the entire stage goes dark for a moment. The choreography for the teacup part is completely different, with Kanade standing in the middle as everyone starts to move quite robotically, ending with them lifting their hands to their throats, which is a concerning movement. Before the transition to the final chorus, everything just turns ominously red for a moment, and instead of reaching out to a teacup, Kanade reaches out to a little purple orb that quickly disappears. As the line about Kanade's thoughts stopping is sung, you can quite literally see her just kind of zone out and stop dancing. And from this point onwards, her movements are slightly more sluggish compared to everyone else. The final pose is different too, as Kanade stands in the center with a hand to her heart, determined as ever to save Mafuyu. Overall, I just completely adore this 3D MV. It very quickly shot up to being one of my favorites in the game. It just hits that perfect balance of being cute and dreamy, whilst still having enough hints to the true nature of what's going on. Next, let's look at the 2D MV. And if you thought I was nearly done yapping, don't look at the remaining runtime. The main motifs used in this MV are the game Cat's Cradle and the concept of the Red Thread of Fate. The Red Thread of Fate originates from Chinese mythology, in which it's said that you're tied to your soulmate by an invisible red thread. This thread may stretch or tangle, but it will never break. Whoever is tied to the other end of that thread is somebody that you're destined to meet, and someone that you share an unbreakable bond with. In the Japanese version of the myth, this invisible thread is tied to the pinky fingers specifically, since, as I mentioned earlier, the pinky is associated with promises. I spoke about Red Thread of Fate imagery in my Mizu 5 video, but there I only spoke about it in the context of Mizuki and Enna, because I had to stay on topic. But the Red Thread of Fate isn't only used for those two, it's also used for Night Court as a whole, and this imagery is already present back in the very first commissions for Night Court. The two Mafu Mafu songs that started it all, Kuyamu to Kaite Mirai and Keitai Renwa. For the sake of my point here, I'm going to be considering Keitai Renwa to be Mizuki and Enna's song, and Kuyamu to Kaite Mirai to be Kanade and Mafuyu's song. I know it is their whole unit song, but just bear with me here. Both of the original MVs for these songs on Mafu Mafu's channel feature Red Thread of Fate imagery, except it's used differently in both. In Keitai Renwa, we see two threads, one red and one blue, and these threads carry over to the Proseka 2D MV as well. This imagery is used between Mizuki and Enna to show that they'll always find their way back to one another no matter what happens. It's the more classic reading of the Red Thread of Fate, whereas the red thread seen in Kuyamu to Kaite Mirai doubles as an electrocardiogram. This MV is set in a hospital, and the girl we see is a patient, and we see that her red thread is tied to a paper crane. In Japan, paper cranes are sometimes given to sick people to wish for their recovery. So I interpret these cranes as being the girl's hopes that things will improve for her. However, as the MV goes on, the crane crumples and more medication appears around it. The thread starts to straighten out as her heartbeat gets weaker, and then it flatlines right at the end of the song. Meaning that the girl didn't recover. Now, the girl in the MV on Mafu's channel is an OC unrelated to Proseka, but she does bear some resemblance to Kanade, and not only that, but for one single frame, like literally a single frame in the 3D MV, we are shown the crane visual, essentially tying the two MVs together. Now, my theory here is that Kanade and Mafuyu's Red Thread of Fate is being used as a foil to Mizuki and Enna's. Mizuki and Enna had already established themselves before they met, and their thread represents how strong their friendship is. In contrast, Mafuyu doesn't know who she is, and Kanade doesn't spare a second thought about herself. And this is why they found purpose in one another and ended up codependent. Rather than a thread that connects them, their thread is more akin to a lifeline, just like how the thread is portrayed in Kuyamu's MV. In Kanade's case, Red threads are also present on the outfits for Someday from the Depths of Despair. And this is fitting since it tells the story of how Night Court first started, so you could say that this is when their threads first connected. The initial designs for the empty sekai vocaloids are covered in red threads and bows as well, furthering this motif. And this brings us to Cat's Cradle, which is a game that is played by passing a loop of string back and forth between players. The goal being to make a bunch of different shapes with the string for as long as possible. This game can also be played solo. Cat's Cradle has been prominent in Night Court's story ever since Mafuyu's first focus event, in which we see that Mizuki taught Miku how to play Cat's Cradle, and she cut the strings off a doll in order to play it herself. All of this thread imagery is likely being used to represent the connections that Night Court have formed with each other, and how forming their little music circle has changed all of their lives in one way or another. But strings can easily be used to represent less positive things as well, like being tied down or controlled. And Cat's Cradle is a game that keeps looping until you mess up. In theory, it could just continue forever if no one intervenes. So now that we've established the main motifs at play here, we can jump right into the 2D MV. This MV is illustrated by Hidane, who also worked on the Vocaloid MV for Tricoloju as the production manager. So that's yet another connection to that song. The video itself was put together by Risu, and the lyric design was done by Hitami. We open with a computer booting up, and then see a few console windows before Kanade appears. This computer aesthetic is present throughout the MV, with the red threads appearing along these coordinates that have already been mapped out. After doing a lot of digging, probably more than necessary, I believe these lines are supposed to be like motion paths that you use to animate things in editing programs like After Effects. Since the red thread follows the paths and we saw a mouse cursor at the start of the MV, so it's probably playing into how Night Court make their own MVs for their songs. I asked on my community tab what you guys thought about these lines, and I received a couple different responses, so I'll put some of them on screen here. Whatever they are exactly, I think that these paths are supposed to represent just that, different paths that one can take in their life. We start with Kanade, who is holding the threads loosely and looks unsure what to do with them. And I say threads plural because if you pay attention to how they spawn in, there are actually 3 of them. These could perhaps represent the other 3 members of Night Court and how Kanade brought them all together, and only one thread continues out of her hands. This thread is passed on to Mizuki, and we see her tie a bow in it. Bows not only represent Mizuki's relationship with gender, but also represent her interests in cute things and fashion. Mizuki used to cut off her connections with people because she feared them treating her differently once she came out. However, now that Night Court have accepted her, she has mended this connection and doesn't want it to come apart again. Next is Mafuyu, who makes a cute little rabbit in the thread. Rabbits are a common motif for Mafuyu, as they tie back into the picture book that she used to love as a kid. They also represent memories with her mother, as she used to cut apple slices into bunny shapes for her. Lastly, the thread is passed to Enna, and she doesn't make a shape with her hands, but instead the thread wraps around her paintbrush. Enna's dream is to become an artist, and she's grown up around art. She can't imagine her life without it, and thus her destiny has always been tied to art. And what's notable about this sequence is that everyone except Kanade does something with the thread. Kanade is the only one who is unsure what to do with it, the only one who is unsure what to make of her own future. In all of these illustrations, the thread loosely wraps around everyone's pinky as well, which is a neat little detail. Meiko doesn't have a thread, but instead sings with a hand to her chest. As she asks which thread is tangled, we can see the motion paths covered in crosses and glitching out in front of her. And these paths are in Mafuyu and Kanade's colour. And there's one in Mizuki's too, but let's just ignore that. And this is indicating that they've lost their way or come to a dead end. Then we see Kanade standing alone with her back to us. And this visual just makes the way Kusunoki sings sound really lonely. We can also talk about the third implication of this lyric that I mentioned earlier, and that's the fact that the red thread of fate is tied to your pinky finger. We can't see Kanade's fingers at all here, but while she's searching for the tangled thread, it could be pulling on the one that's tied to her pinky and digging into her skin. Right before the chorus, we are quickly shown a bunch of different string figures, which I will go into more detail about soon. During the chorus, we can see everyone waving their hands to the 4x4 beat, and this is specifically the 4x4 beat pattern that a conductor uses. Enna is the only one holding a baton, and it honestly looks more like a knitting needle to me, so I'm not sure what the significance of that is. Mafuyu and Enna use their right hand, Mizuki uses her left, and Kanade uses both. And this could be a nod to their dominant hands, with Kanade being ambidextrous. I don't know anything about conducting, but from searching around a bit, it seems that mirroring your hand movements like Kanade is doing is actually discouraged. I even found this comment saying that it's just a waste of movement. So Kanade using both hands could also show that she's overworking herself and using way too much unnecessary effort. Everyone has a soft smile on their face as they keep in time with the beat, but only Mafuyu and Kanade have their eyes open. We don't actually see Mizuki and Enna's eyes at all throughout this MV, which could be a nod to the fact that they haven't noticed just how bad the situation between Kanade and Mafuyu has gotten. As the chorus continues, 4 loose threads circle Kanade, and the use of the word avalanche is interesting here, because in Japanese, it's literally made up of the kanji for snow and collapse. And since Mafuyu's online handle is Yuki, snow, this could imply that simply leaving everything to Kanade and remaining codependent will cause her to crumble. There's more lyrics about Kanade trying to search for that sound that'll save Mafuyu. However, she realizes that it's almost time to wake up. It's almost time to wake up to reality. Shout out to user Nightwatcher3 for pointing this out, but if we flip this image, Kanade is standing in the same way as on the cover for Nightcore's first single. The red threads are even there in the foreground and everything. Like, this is such a crazy detail if intentional, cause it's showing us that if the rest of Nightcore are to move on, Kanade will still be left standing there in the same way that she was 6 years ago. Here the visuals get a bit more abstract, a door with a heart appearing for Mafuyu. And this door could tie in with the one that appeared in the empty sekai, which as of recording, Mafuyu still hasn't opened. What's in the box, man? Each of the lyrics here can relate to the character that's singing them. Mizuki's referring to how Enna discovering her secret felt like the end of the world. Mafuyu's referring to how all she wants is to be loved by her mother. Kanade's referring to her current relationship with Mafuyu. And Enna's referring to how she used to post her selfies on social media for that temporary sense of fulfillment. Something interesting to note on Enna's screen is the way the thread isn't coloured in the places that she's painted over, and this might be referencing how she almost gave up on art entirely and didn't believe she had a future in pursuing it. Back to Meiko, and now she's looking down at her empty hand. The background is dark now, and the motion paths are still glitching out around her. And what she says to Kanade is that rather than searching for this tangled thread, she should instead cut herself free from it. Basically saying that she should separate herself from Mafuyu before they get way too tangled. But still standing alone in what's now a black void, Kanade wonders what'll happen to her if she really were to part from Mafuyu. What would happen when she no longer has that goal to dedicate her heart and soul to? Nightcore are still all keeping time with the beat, but the background has gotten noticeably darker. Then during the instrumental break, we get a better look at all of the string figures that flashed across the screen earlier. There is what looks like the soldier's bed, which is the second shape you make in a standard game of Cat's Cradle. However, the bottom string is missing, which could be an error or it could have been left out intentionally. Reddit user DrugonMonster made a post identifying these figures, and they mentioned trying to replicate the shape as it's shown in the MV, and they actually concluded that it's physically impossible, so I'm leaning towards the missing thread being an error. Next is the walking dog. This figure is pretty cool because the dog can actually walk back and forth. Then we have Jacob's ladder, seagull, shooting star, and spring butterfly. The bunny shape that Mafuyu makes at the start of the MV isn't a standard cat's cradle figure, but it is possible in real life as well. Now, what's interesting about these string figures is the person who is supposedly making them. In an area conversation, we learn that Kanade isn't very good at cat's cradle. She's seen struggling to make the Tokyo Tower shape, which looks to be a modified Jacob's ladder. Meiko, however, is able to create the shape with ease. We can see Kanade's computer setup in the background, so Kanade is supposedly the one making these shapes. But then, how is she suddenly able to make all these complex figures? Well, my theory is that Kanade isn't actually making these shapes, but they are instead representing the possibility that she could. If Kanade were to take a break, think about herself more, and maybe pick up more hobbies, the possibilities are endless, like all of the shapes we're seeing being created. She could be doing any number of different things with her life, but instead she shut herself away in her room to compose non-stop. And the reason that I think these string figures are an illusion is because none of them have Kanade's sleeve present on the wrist. It's only after the montage that we see Kanade's actual hand appear, and she reveals the end of the thread to be an Ethernet cable. So it's like it shows all of the things she could be doing with the thread, but instead it's a cable that she plugs in. And this is a cool visual because Nightcord found each other through the internet, and it's what connects them. So in a way, their red thread of fate is the internet. We see Kanade plug the Ethernet cable in, but then there's a lingering shot on an empty port, which maybe implies that there's nothing on the other end of the cord. We then see Kanade hugging her legs to her chest with a sad look on her face. The thread from before is now just loosely falling around her. She isn't even trying to make something out of it anymore. As Mafuyu says stop, it looks as if a clock hand is spinning around, so it's like she's telling time itself to stop. I also love how Sato-hina sings this line. Like, the way her voice kind of drops off at the end really adds to the sadness of the lyric. The reality that Kanade comes to realize here is left up to interpretation, but personally I associate this chunk of lyrics with the scene where Kanade was laying in her bed in the story, and it was Luca who cruelly yet kindly made Kanade consider her situation. It could also be Kanade realizing that once Mafuyu leaves, she'll be all alone again. We reach the final chorus and are greeted with an illustration that I still can't believe is in an official MV. I actually screamed when I watched this for the first time. And despite the fact that other people are singing too, the only characters shown on screen are Kanade and Mafuyu. Just them in their own little world, coexisting and sinking further into their unhealthy coping mechanisms. Kanade looks as though she's guarding Mafuyu, protecting her from harm and keeping her close. And this isn't the first time Kanade has been depicted doing this. And once she closes her eyes, Kanade is in a pose that's similar to her Carnation Recollection card, which makes me think that Kanade has started to consider Mafuyu family. However, this image isn't without its cracks. Though they may be smiling, both girls have dark circles under their eyes, and they look exhausted. Then if you look at the thread, it's loosely wrapping itself around Mafuyu's neck, as well as both of their legs. And this is why I said that string imagery can easily be used in a negative sense. Kanade and Mafuyu's red thread of fate has turned into a cage that binds them, neither of them being able to live without the other. They're tied down, just as Kanade's grandma said, and just like Mafuyu was at the start of her story. And not only that, but these threads are no longer following the motion paths that are on screen. The motion paths aren't even glitching out like before, they've just stopped still, reflecting how Kanade and Mafuyu have stagnated by being together. Meiko cuts through and asks who all of this is even for. She's trying to nudge Kanade into the right direction and maybe make her consider herself more. But Kanade doesn't get the hint and immediately falls back into thinking about what she can do for Mafuyu. The last shot is of Kanade, and we see her sitting on the ground with the threads at her feet. And considering the last thing we just saw was her with Mafuyu, this might be Kanade after Mafuyu has left. And all she can do is sit there in the darkness, thinking about what she can do for someone else instead of herself. We flash through all of the string figures again as the song plays out. And considering that the song opens with Kanade sitting the same way that we see at the end, this could imply that the loop is just going to continue. Like how Cat's Cradle will just keep going until you make a mistake. And that's the 2D MV. I like how this MV took a completely different direction to the 3D MV. Like, it uses completely different motifs, and yet they still work really well with the song. Lastly, we have the vocaloid version of the song, which is up on LonePi's channel. And I left this MV for last because it tells its own story that's unrelated to proseka. Before I get into it though, I just want to point out that when you like this song on Vocaloid Collection, this custom message pops up, which reads, "I have to keep believing that living for someone else is the greatest virtue there is." So if there was anyone still doubting that this song is about self-sacrifice and codependency, this is basically confirmation from the producer herself. The Vocaloid version is sung by Miku, and the MV is illustrated and edited by LonePi herself. Now, I won't be going through this entire MV section by section, because this video is already long enough, but this MV appears to tell a story of two sisters. The older sister was a well-regarded artist, and the younger sister wanted to follow in her footsteps. However, while the exact circumstances aren't clear, it seems the older sister was struggling with something and may have drowned in a lake. We can see in this sequence the little sister rushing outside and running to a body of water. She continues running until her movements are sluggish and her hair looks wet. Her sister turns around and she wakes with a start. This is followed by the "Stop It" lyrics appearing as text messages, which reads as someone having informed her of the bad news and she can't accept it. And then the harsh reality that she comes to realize would be that her sister is no longer alive. During the last chorus, we get this really unsettling visual of the sisters holding hands, except only one of them is moving. I find the lyrics that appear on screen really interesting during this part because they move in such a sporadic way, with kanji turning into pictures and the font switching constantly. It really makes it feel as though this girl has lost her mind. Also, for a brief moment, a red thread tied around their pinkies appears, so it's neat that that motif is present here too. We see a painting of the little sister smiling, and this was likely the final painting that the older sister left behind, wishing for her sister to live happily even after she's gone. A bunch of little pictures flash in the clover at the end of the song, and these probably add to the lore, but I can't work it out personally. I've also seen some people theorize that it's actually the little sister that died, since the older sister is wearing funeral clothes at the end, so that would mean the little sister is in limbo or something and trying to help her sister from the afterlife. Either way, this MV tells a much darker story than the one related to proseka, and I love how Miku's tuning reflects that. Like, she sings cutely for the most part, but then towards the end of the song she starts to sound more robotic and broken. Overall, the song is just a lot more unsettling here, and Miku's vocals really add to that. The little sister likely feels responsible for her sister's death, and is now pursuing art in her place, living for her sister instead of herself. And that's why she must believe that living for someone else is the greatest virtue there is. It's similar to how Kanade feels guilty for what happened to her dad, so she keeps composing in hopes she can atone. But yeah, with that we have finally reached the end of the video. This one took me a long time to put together because there is just so much going on with this event. Like, there's too much going on. Like, no joke, this script alone took me like a month to write just because of all the stuff I wanted to mention. If it wasn't obvious by now, I just really like Kanade, okay? As of recording, the latest event to be announced is NA7, so I still have no idea what to expect for Kanade and Mafuyu's 7th rotation. Anyways, let me know your thoughts on the event or the song or anything else in the comments. And yeah, see you next time! And Kanade was searching for a thread, and then she recoils as if thanks, cockatoo. But instead the thrap? What? Reflecting how Kanade and Mafuyu have stagnated